Welcome to our press preview here on Sky News at 9 with a first look at what's making the front pages this Christmas Day as they arrive. Joining us for those headlines, Benedict Pavio and Nabila Ramdani. Thank you very much indeed for joining us tonight, and a Merry Christmas to you, as we have to say that now, even though we've got just, well, a few hours left. Let's update you first on tonight's top stories. And 2 children and a 32-year-old woman who died in a car crash on the M6 motorway near Stoke. 2 other women who were in the car are being treated in hospital tonight. And in a separate accident, 2 people were killed and a 3rd seriously injured in a crash in Hampshire. Police were called to the scene just after 10 this morning on the B3349 near Basingstoke. And a plane carrying tourists has crash-landed in Burma, killing 2 passengers and a motorcyclist on the ground. But 4 Britons on board were among scores of survivors, which many at the scene say was remarkable given the wreckage that's been left. Well, those are tonight's headlines. What of tomorrow's in the papers as we take a look at, well, it's the 2 red tops, the Sun, first of all, that we've got there, Boxing Day Sun, and it's reflecting on this dreadful story of this, well, as we believe, a family in this car on the M6 motorway. Unconfirmed reports that one of the women who survived, the driver, may be the boy's mother. And your heart just goes out for the families involved in this, doesn't it?
Well, terrible, because to survive a crash, if it is true that it's the mother who has survived, that you would lose your 2 children, and if it's possible to make it even worse on Christmas Day. Who knows whether it was, you know, slippery road, aquaplaning, tiredness, distraction in the car. So much can happen in a car.
Yeah, a reminder actually that motorway speeds, if something does happen, it can still be pretty traumatic. I mean, they're still trying to work out the sequence of events, so that it's believed that the car hit a tree and then overturned.
And no other car involved.
No other car involved, yeah.
Absolutely. I think the title, I mean, the headline, Christmas Day Horror, is exactly what it is. I mean, death in road accidents are tragic enough, but when it happens on Christmas Day and you lose 2 little children,
sitting in the back.
It adds to the tragedy enormously, and you're quite right to
certainly, I mean, the emergency services too, reflecting on what it's meant for all those fire crews and the ambulance crews there that have to attend these things on Christmas Day.
Well, we may come on to it, but the Queen today in her message, amongst the many messages she was giving about people who are giving up their time, their sense of duty, as indeed the one that she's displayed for so very many years in this country. All these people, whether it's the armed forces, whether it's the police, who are on duty, come what may on a day like today.
And
very difficult.
The police are yet to establish a picture of what exactly happened. I mean, the earlier reports suggested that, of course, roads have been wet because of the weather. And there are suggestions that the car went off the road and collided into a tree. But, you know, they are putting out calls for witnesses to try and...
Yeah, one imagines with the amount of traffic on the motorway at that time of day, and clearly there was a huge queue built up and they had to close the motorway, there may well have been some other witnesses who saw the sequence and may be able to really add to the police's picture to get an idea of what happened and find out, of course, if you know, there are any lessons to be learnt from these things. That's the other thing that they try to do is work out, you know, what can be done to get a safer picture on our roads. But you mentioned the Queen, and there is a fantastic photo of her there on the top of the Sun, because there was a worry, given this cold that she had when she hadn't turned up on Sunday at Sandringham, that she might be, you know, under the weather.
She was feeling a bit poorly. I think she'd come down
which
with
is very
flu.
rare. So rare for her.
Well,
actually, I don't find this picture flattering at all. I think that, I mean, obviously we know she doesn't go in for Botox or anything silly like that, but I think she looks far more wrinkled. I think that the picture on the front of the mirror, which is calling itself the Christmas mirror, is much kinder. What is remarkable, actually...
Still the same blue hat, yeah?
Yes, the same blue hat, but as a female, I'm picking up on the fact that there are distinctly far fewer wrinkles on that, so I don't know if they've photoshopped it.
I think we can bring some of the pictures in at Sandringham today, but clearly
there's relief that she's there.
Yeah, and the feeling that we've had in this Diamond Jubilee year was there, with the children giving the bouquets and the number of people that turned out. And I suppose it was the sort of punctuation mark to this really successful year, wasn't it?
It is, just after the punctuation mark, about finding out that Kate and Wills are expecting. So that's lots of question marks and exclamation points.
Exactly. Well, that's what the Sun goes with, but she misses her boys. One of them, the Duke of Cambridge, is with his wife, staying with the Middletons for the holiday. And of course, Prince Harry is in Afghanistan, but no doubt he will have received his Christmas box.
Yes, yeah, and his turkey and his Brussels sprouts as everyone else has done. But I mean, the other reflection, of course, is the Duke of Edinburgh there, who was missing last year because of the rather dramatic events when he was being treated in hospital, of course, with his heart scare. But yes, the family firm not quite there in full numbers, but I think I'm counting about 10 to 12 there, so it's not a bad show for them, is it?
No, not a bad show.
No, not at all.
What do they make of this in France?
Well, interestingly, I was just looking before coming on set about that, and I thought that one particular French channel, news channel, had an interesting take. And they're very interested. I have to tell you that the most popular people in France, as far as celebrities are concerned, are Kate and Wills.
Really?
Yes, and there is fascination with the Queen, obviously, since France got rid of theirs. But one particular point is they're very much picking up on her speech, on the fact that she's very in touch with 2012 or the 21st century, and these 3D glasses carry a huge fascination. But an interesting point, I thought, was made that this is a speech today, a message that is not written by the government, says this particular news channel, and that this is an occasion for the Queen to write and express her own personal opinions.
And it goes around the Commonwealth, but what about the Middle East then, Nabila? Does it resonate in any way?
Well, I think she's seen as somebody with masses of privileges, and it doesn't strike as fair, to be honest. There were reports, for example, showing how many mansions she has, her assets, and what kind of privileged lifestyle all the royal family actually leads. And it doesn't sit well with people struggling for justice and fairness in those societies. And indeed with some sections of British society as well, when one of the keywords which dominated perhaps 2012 in the news agenda is the word austerity. So there's a contrast there that that's not spoken of.
Yeah.
But what isn't spoken about? I hear that, and I think that's very true, and it resonates in some parts of the world, and indeed in the UK. However, the message that is not very often displayed, well, it wouldn't be in an ostentatious way, is when the Queen got up a few years ago at the UN and made a very brief speech, as she had to do, the wealth of experience that this woman has. Is it the 12th Prime Minister? It is that she now has. It is something like 20 foreign ministers. It is extraordinary, the wealth of experience that she does have.
I was just wondering whether her image...
And that's something that's lost internationally.
Had her image changed internationally? Parachuting in the Olympics with Daniel Craig. I mean, did people abroad
in
get
France,
a different...
hugely popular. I mean, that was yeah. But I
think
see the other side. Yeah.
But there's a discrepancy between how the Queen herself is perceived and how the rest of the royal family is viewed.
Yeah.
I think she's very much a revered figure herself because she's kept a low profile throughout her time as a royal, as a monarch, effectively. But the generation of young royals are very much perceived as celebrities, especially abroad.
Because they're all over the magazines that are sold.
This is one of the problems
and
with
that's
Kate
what
Middleton.
French magazines argued when they run the topless pictures of Kate
Down
Middleton.
in the south of France.
It's because they saw her, they argued as fair game because they see her more as a celebrity than
has
a
that
royal.
view changed with the sort of paparazzi and the international press, particularly the reaction to the French publication of those pictures?
Well, remember that the defence of the original magazine, Closer, a very French magazine owned by an Italian. But the fact of the matter is that the defence of that magazine was that Kate was a celebrity. And that she shouldn't have been posing.
And so it was near a public road. I think they established it was about 100 yards or something from a public road.
Or there was a clear breach of her privacy, let's not forget that as well.
There was a very clear breach of her privacy, but the fact of the matter is that she is perceived, and so is William, as a celebrity, and therefore that they felt that they had rights if you are a celebrity, although they fell foul of French law, which is going to go in the courts now.
Interesting, when we look at the splash there in the Mirror, it's going for, a straightforward sort of crime news story, really. They're not reflecting on these other matters. Yeah. This is a policeman who saved a woman's life, they say, by tackling a man who'd slashed with a samurai sword. Latest we've got is the man's now been charged with attempted murder, Ahaya Timofey. has been charged with 2 accounts of attempted murder and will appear at Highbury Corner Magistrates Court tomorrow. But clearly they're looking at the actions of this policeman when perhaps the police have been in some question in recent days.
But he had a bag of weapons, this man. I mean, you know, you just wonder where these swords, where these weapons are really coming from. I mean, it's clear that there is a real problem of the easy access and the easy availability if you've got the money and the inclination.
Which I suppose is a similar argument to America.
Absolutely.
With the availability of guns.
It's availability, but you know, availability to guns causes far more damage than availability to.
But, I mean, this guy's walking around with a rucksack knives, with knives and weapons and swords. And if we're always going to put it down, as it seems to be the case in America, increasingly over the last few incidents, that they have some mental problem, gosh.
But it has to be said that a samurai sword...
We'll have to wait for the court proceedings.
We don't know about this here. We don't know about this here.
But a samurai sword is an unusual weapon for assault. Yeah. But I think, as you suggested, Mark, I think it's perhaps an attempt for the Mirror to rehabilitate the image of the police, which has been a bit tarnished, it has to be said, in the Andrew Mitchell
indeed.
controversy.
Well, we're still waiting for some of the other front pages to come in. We've got the web editions as well. Let's take a look at the Mail. And yes, it's going with the reportage on the car crash. And it's reflecting on the Queen as well. Some other... Well, in fact, they've got the pictures at the bottom. I'm quite puzzled as to why they've put the photo montage of the royal family there down at the bottom of the page. I would have thought that was the sort of selling point, really. I'm not sure, I have to say, about Prince Charles's overcoat on a sort of chic. Would not be perhaps the word you use in France.
Casual chic, maybe.
Well, I think that the shoes. Are we really doing a fashion review of the royal family?
Family firm on show. You know, this is what it's all about, isn't it?
Well, yes, I think the shoes would go very well with another pair of trousers.
Right, I mean, it's the coat. It's very Edward VIII, isn't it, that coat? It's
I quite like it. I mean, well...
Yeah. I think, actually, maybe that Prince Edward has gone to the same tailor. I don't know. Slightly slimmer version.
Not a hand-me-down.
Or maybe it's the Downton Abbey look. I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something here.
It looks like it. It has to be said that Camilla is very trendy, if we can have a look at her again.
Oh, going back to the blue.
She's
well, that's
wearing
French
petrol
blue,
which is has been very trendy this year. So she definitely got, you know, good advice.
Right, OK.
Right, I'm going to stop my fashion comments, I think, of the royal family.
And then, as we said, well, another rather good photograph of the Queen there, but as you say, not a hint of Botox or airbrushing, quite rightly too. So, right, so those are some of the issues that the papers are addressing. Much more to come, we hope, with a few more front pages as they arrive, and more of our analysis too. Stay with us here on our Christmas Day press preview.
I am Lance Corporal Ian Chapman from the Royal Dragoon Guards from Leeds, and I just want to say Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to everyone back home, and I'll see you again soon.
We're looking through the newspapers' front pages as they come in, and Boxing Day editions, of course. Benedict Pavio and Nabila Ramdani joining us tonight. Welcome once more. And indeed, the Telegraph is in, and there's plenty there as well. Another photo of a very radiant looking Queen. As they say, no dampening the Queen's spirits, despite that cold. She was at Sandringham, but its splash is going on the latest BBC bashing, should we say. Watchdog, which is the National Audit Office, to investigate the number of £100,000 plus redundancy deals handed out over the past 3 years from, of course, licence payers' money.
Yes, I think this is going to go down extremely badly. OK, admittedly, it's not terribly new. This is over the last 3 years.
But they've actually got all the figures now, it looks.
Yeah, so the one Mark Byford, I think we knew already, but it seems that now, under the Freedom of Information laws, we've got some more.
Yeah, almost 200 received payoffs of more than £100,000.
I think the Parliamentary Committee will really have something to say about that, quite rightly.
Yeah, well, in fact, further down, there's even more detail. A total of 14 have been given payoffs of more than £300,000, actually worth a total of £6 million. The biggest payoff is, say, Mark Byford, former Director of Journalism, well, he's Deputy DG as well, received £949,000, which beggars belief, because, I mean, all right, you might get some bankers getting some golden handshakes, but clearly in the private sector, you're not going to get that array of senior figures getting money like that.
No, and one of the concerns, I think, is also that some of these payments have been made as people left, and there are some question marks about why they suddenly got these...
What, rewarded for failure is the phrase that some have used?
Yes, it has been one of the ones. So I think this story, plus, of course, we're still waiting for one investigation on what happened with the...
George Entwistle.
Yes,
yeah.
With the whole Savile saga, is really going to mean that the BBC is going to stay in the news headlines for some time to come. And this is going to be very unwelcome when it's got a new DG that's arriving, Tony Hall, in March.
Unfair?
And also, I mean, even in the private sector, it's usually people at the very top who get that kind of payments. But now it seems that within the BBC, I mean, the Telegraph is highlighting the fact that there are many people who are getting that kind of six-figure salary. So that is going to be particularly upsetting. It's not just, you know, the people in the management, but it seems to be more widespread than that.
Yeah, and the National Audit Office, you know, doesn't really let go once it's got its teeth into something, because clearly they are the watchdog for public expenditure. So
and I think it's the latest controversy with the departure of George Entwistle, which brought that kind of story to the fore even more.
Yeah. Let's take a look then. We haven't spoken of the papal address yet, but that's reflected on the bottom right-hand corner. New technology and instant communications leaving people no room for the important things in life, according to the Pope. Likening people today to the innkeepers in Bethlehem who had no space for Mary and Joseph, meaning Jesus was born in a stable. In fact, I think the pictures we had from Bethlehem yesterday, it was absolutely packed, which I think is a contrast to what happened in previous years, where clearly people were rather reluctant to go there because of things. But again, will this have any resonance in the Middle East?
Well, absolutely, and he, I mean, we've heard also the Archbishop of Canterbury here in his Christmas address making a particular reference to the Middle East and in particular the situation in Palestine, you know, referring to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and how religion can be a force for good, bringing people together, even though the situation remains intractable and indeed unresolved.
Yeah,
but at least
I thought his words actually on Syria particularly were quite strong, weren't they?
And people in Syria, and the Christian community in Syria, made a particular effort to celebrate and mark, you know, this Christmas holiday in particular, amidst the horror of what's going on.
I think, I mean, the Pope's message was about trying to find a resolution, all parties in Syria, also about China being open to the benefits of all religions. He just didn't mention Christianity. But I think what's interesting about the technology, I watched a fascinating program earlier on this evening with Sister Wendy, and it was originally...
The art critic.
Well, the art critic, and it was supposed to be about art, but then it turned out to be quite a lot about her life. And she, I thought, interestingly, at this time, busy time and stressful time for a lot of people, some people with lots of family members they don't usually see throughout the year, and tempers beginning to flare possibly, despite good resolutions. It's the lack of silence. And the fact that what came across with her is the fact that we live in a culture where there is so little silence, a lot of noise, that we are constantly being entertained, and that we don't, we're not, hardly ever alone. We're hardly ever alone with ourselves, so we hardly know what we think.
We may therefore have some sympathy with this story. As we say, at a time of year when most parents have difficulty controlling excitable children, many may sympathise or will sympathise with the father who took the ultimate step and called 999 to report a child who refused to go to bed. The schoolboy 14 playing on his games console at midnight, ignoring his parents' pleas to switch it off and retire. Are my family watching? I don't know. But the late night row became so heated that the exasperated father picked up the phone and called the police for help. Officers in North Wales said yesterday it was one of hundreds of inappropriate 999. However, one does think,
it is inappropriate. I mean, those poor chaps, women and men, have got so much more to do. It might seem funny, but it's not funny, and people really should
be
not...
drastic.
However, an indication perhaps about what parents have been through these last few days.
Yeah, well, they say that most murders happen at Christmas time, so...
Mail is in as well. So, middle-class care bill fiasco. PM backed £35,000 cap on fees. Now LD face paying double. Under coalition plans to be unveiled in the new year, the upper limit in the amount that must be contributed could be £60,000 or even £75,000 per person. So perhaps another broken promise, perhaps people might see, by the politicians?
Yes, I think that's not going to go down very well. A lot of concern, if we look at the last few months, the concern we've seen reports about how badly some elderly people are being treated. I think that there is concern, and I think it's a reflection of a society, how well you treat the older people, I think, in your community. And I think sometimes we fail them a great deal. And we don't know actually how to profit enough, I think, in our society from the wisdom. It's not all about being super active. You can be very active up here.
And culturally, that's quite different elsewhere in the world, isn't it? That, you know,
yes,
the elder members of the family are revered.
Revered, and indeed there's a network of family members looking after each other. There's more of a sense of solidarity.
An extended family.
Because they are essentially less individualistic societies as well. I think the growth of capitalism often goes hand in hand with individualism.
One wonders politically what the government's actually storing up here, because when we look at pension reform, the issue of care for the elderly, the issue perhaps of other benefits such as winter fuel allowance and bus passes going, they are actually tweaking the tail of a sort of demographic that does go to vote. Grey power is quite effective at the ballot box.
It is. I wonder, I don't quite believe that they'll take away the winter payment allowance. I think some of these are scare stories, and then you don't take it away and you look kind because you didn't take it away.
So you worry and frighten people first, wave the flag and say, actually, we've decided, no, you're going to keep this, so they look good.
So I don't believe that one.
Right.
But isn't the headline slightly misleading with the word middle class? Because, of course, those who are hit the harshest are the most vulnerable members of society, elderly people, and increasingly young people who, you know, graduate, but also often find a very difficult job market.
Yeah, but perhaps that's how the Mail gets its readers, is by frightening the middle class. Some may suggest. Thank you very much indeed for your selection on these Boxing Day editions, which are published for tomorrow. Don't forget, though, more on those front pages at 10, plus a full press preview at 11:30, and we'll be looking inside those papers then with Michael Goldfarb and Tira Schubart. But thanks both to Benedict and to Nabila, and to wish you Merry Christmas once more. Thank you very much for joining us. Coming up too on Sky News at 10, more on that M6 tragedy. 2 children and a woman killed in the crash. Investigators trying to find out exactly what happened. It's time for us to take a look at our papers with the press preview, with the Boxing Day editions, of course. Joining us tonight to take a look at those papers is Nabila Ramdani and Michael Goldfarb. Welcome once more, and to wish you a Merry Christmas on this Christmas night. And Happy Hanukkah, we should say as well.
Been and gone.
Been and gone. You've done that. It's all over and finished with that. Anyway, was it happy?
It was extremely happy. All 8 nights of it. Thank you.
Good. First, though, let's update you on tonight's top stories. It's a very sad situation on the M6 motorway where crash investigators are trying to find out how 2 brothers and a 32-year-old woman died in a car crash near Stoke. 2 other women, including the boy's mother, who's the driver, are now being treated in hospital for serious injuries. And in a separate accident, 2 people were killed and a third seriously injured in a crash in Hampshire. Police were called to the scene just after 10 this morning on the B3349 near Basingstoke. And a plane carrying tourists has crash-landed in Burma, killing 2 passengers and a motorcyclist on the ground. But 4 Britons on board the plane were among scores who managed to escape. Well, those are tonight's headlines. What of tomorrow's with the Boxing Day editions? The front stories first on The Sun, and it's going with that motorway crash with the 2 brothers and the 32-year-old woman being killed at Stoke. That story making the front of The Eye as well. A black day on Britain's roads, it reflects, including the details of that crash in Hampshire. For The Times, though, it's the High Court judge who's calling for an end to plans to allow gay marriage in churches. Why, it's the Christmas Day swimmers, brave souls, pictured on the front there. To The Independent, though, in a survey commissioned for that paper, the public's backing gay church marriages. So the public debate very much is on. Different poll then for The Guardian, which says that people believe hosting the Olympics was worth every penny. Daily Mirror with a story about the policeman who saved a woman from an attacker who was wielding a samurai sword. He's due to appear in court tomorrow on charges of attempted murder. 194 executives at the BBC have had severance pay of more than £100,000 according to the Daily Telegraph. Well, the Daily Mail says couples on middle incomes could be paying £150,000 for their care in old age. Those are the headlines. Let's see what Nabila and Michael make of them. And I think you're reflecting first on this dreadful tragedy of this car crash. The Sun, particularly, and the Mail going with that. Let's call up the front page of the Sun. 2 kids die in M6 tragedy. That's the inside story. There's the Sun front page, and we now know they're 2 brothers, and the mother was driving. Awful, awful thing to happen on Christmas Day.
Well, that's precisely the kind of stories you don't want to read about, let alone on Christmas Day. It's, you know, it's an absolute tragedy, but it raises a lot of questions. I think the police are still trying to establish what happened exactly, and there are speculations about, of course, you know, the road conditions will come into, will be taken into account. The
especially all this wet
conditions.
weather we've had recently, what seems to have happened is that there's just this one vehicle, this Ford Focus involved, that it hit a tree and then overturned. No other vehicle involved. But we do understand there have been a series of accidents on this stretch of motorway, so clearly there have to be questions asked about weather conditions or road surface and whether motorway speeds ought to be kept at their current limit, of course.
Well, you know, it's interesting. I mean, in its way, it kind of reminds me of the argument going on in America about gun control and should you reduce the size of the number of bullets in a magazine so that if someone wants to go crazy and shoot people, they don't get 30 free shots in a minute, they get 9, and would that reduce fatalities? And I do think that it's been shown over the years that lower speed limits lead to fewer fatalities. Yeah. They also lead to longer journeys and greater driver frustration, and a lot of people regard, we used to have 55 after the first oil shock in 1973. It went on for decades in America. It's crept back up. Fatalities have crept back up.
I would qualify that, though.
If I had to theorize, you would think the weather in the Midlands and the West Country has been dire. We had some serious pulses of rain here in London today. It's easy enough to imagine how it could happen.
I would qualify what you've just said, Michael, about speed limit, because it actually has been shown that lower speed limit on motorways is actually far more dangerous.
Well, because the traffic bunches.
Exactly. Yeah. You want to drive slowly on, normal roads, if I may put it that way. But on motorways, you have to stick to a certain limit.
The other thing is that, we're led to believe that car safety has developed so much better braking systems, the integrity of the car themselves, airbags and so on. It is surprising still that we get these fatalities, isn't it, with modern cars?
Well, I think what the police inquiry would be looking at is, the condition of the driver, if there was any substance involved, for example.
Yeah, and we have to say there's no indication of that at the moment, of course, at all.
Yes, absolutely.
There's
but also security issues, as far as the authorities are concerned, maybe more road signs when there are, specific weather conditions.
And the speeds being limited and so on.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, but awful tragedy for the family. And as we say, the mother wanted 2 women tonight in hospital being treated for their injuries. We'll keep you updated. In stable condition at the moment. That's what the hospital is saying. Now, you've gone for the Mail front page, which is looking at... is it scaring the middle class again, which it tends to like to do on the
How else do you get 2.5 million people to buy that paper every day?
However, I mean, there's certainly a very important political message here because, David Cameron was indicating that we had this cut-off limit, 35,000, to provide for old age care, but they're saying this could actually creep up, and it could be as much as £75,000 per person, i.e. 150,000 for Mr. and Mrs. in a household.
Yes, and there's actually more in the inside of the Daily Mail on that story with
this is on page 2.
Yes, with 1 in 10 elderly forced to sell their home to make ends meet. So that's quite a staggering figure and quite a sad one as well.
And that's because of the pension problems on top of everything else, I suppose.
Very much so, and it ties in with the related story on the retirement age, with the government wanting to increase the retirement age. So that's a constant debate we're having, I think, in European societies in general. When should people retire, with obviously people living longer?
Or work till you drop, I think is a phrase used by some.
But I mean, you have to tell your employer that you can work till you drop. I mean, one of the lesser reported aspects of the last 5 years, which started out with this huge shedding of jobs by employers across all industries, is that people in their 50s who are at the peak of their earning years and are perhaps middle managers or actually, you know, at a lower level of executive than the board, they're the ones who are out the door first because they have expensive compensation packages. And what do? Because they don't get rehired. So it's all well and good to say we want to work till, you know, we'll raise the retirement age till 67, but people have to be able to find employers who will employ them till they're 67.
It also depends on the type of job you're doing. If it's, you know,
should we just reflect on what that's actually cost the BBC on the Telegraph, just as an aside, because I do find these figures quite extraordinary. That in the past 3 years, almost 200 senior managers have received payoffs of more than £100,000 each. Now, the first thing one reflects is, why does the BBC have to get rid, in the past 3 years, of almost 200 senior managers anyway?
Well, partially it's because they are trying to streamline. They know they're top-heavy with management. They go after people, again, in their mid-50s and a little older, and they say, well, take the buyout now, and that way we won't have to make you redundant. And here are some very generous terms. Basically, I mean, the BBC, for whom I do a lot of work, and I have a lot of admiration for the people who make programs there, maybe less for executives. The BBC is no different than any other business institution in the last decade. The managers, top management looks after themselves.
Yeah.
They give themselves, they come up with these extraordinary contracts, and basically when they want you to go for a job, say, you know that you'll carry the can if it goes wrong, so you in your negotiation say, well, fine, well, I want 5 years or 3 years salary if you decide to get rid of me. And they get these extraordinary amounts of money. But what is shocking is it is a public service broadcaster, and no one...
And that's licensed payers' money.
No one, you know, even admired executives like Caroline Thompson, who was pipped to the post to become...
But the other thing is the wider picture. This figure here on that paragraph, which is quite staggering, and that is figures obtained by the Daily Telegraph under the Freedom of Information Law show that between 2010 and 2011, the cost of redundancy payments at the corporation more than doubled to £58 million.
Yes.
That's our licence payers' money, paying people not to work at the BBC any longer.
And not only that, but you have to understand the people who work on the shop floor, who put out your competition at News 24.
Short-term contracts.
Short-term contracts. They can't get benefits.
Or even redundancy payments on short-term contracts.
And what happens is you have fewer and fewer people putting out the news, and at the same time, these guys who oversaw this restructuring swan off with this amount of money. It's just not right.
But at the same time, there are legitimate questions to be raised. I mean, the public tend to be very critical about private corporations on how they run, and we're entitled to some transparency, especially so because it's, you know, subsidizes with taxpayers' money. And, you know, we should be entitled to link high incomes with very good management.
High performance.
Exactly. So I think it's a very legitimate story, and good on the Telegraph to stick it on the front page.
Okay. Right, Mail page 3, you've gone inside the papers now for, well, it's not just, I mean, we ought to mention them in passing, because they are actually quite a handsome bunch there. Pudsy's Pup Parade, dancing dog in first reunion with all his brothers and sisters. Do the others dance, do we know, or I don't know? Anyway, it's Kez, Piper, Pudsey, Hero, Toggle and Becky, the siblings brought together to celebrate Christmas and their imminent birthday. And, well, seemingly getting on for the photograph, at least. Anyway, that's beside the site. Well, you've looked at the bottom of the page, the children who wanted a father for Christmas. This is going to tug the heartstrings, I guess.
It's a particularly harrowing story, because, you know, you'd expect, you know, Father Christmas to turn up at Christmas, but not children wanting a father for Christmas. And the story is actually gives, as it says, a snapshot of modern Britain and the condition of, you know, families in the UK, and especially broken families, with a staggering figure.
So this is a survey, or actually this is from the Office for National Statistics, so we can't get more
precise than
but the survey, let's be clear, was carried out at the Westfield shopping centres, east and west in London. So we're not talking about YouGov or something highly scientific. But it is interesting that the 10th most longed for item is a father, but mums came in at 23, because presumably when families break up, children get to stay with mum, who then has to be mum and dad, and is quite a disciplinarian, and they say,
yeah,
where's dad?
We ought to actually add, they're also hoping for a donkey, a chicken or an elephant, the moon, a time machine, a pond cover and beetroot. Might be rather messy in the old stocking. Yeah, it's normally a tangerine, isn't it, or an apple or something, but yeah. A bit of beetroot. Anyway, yes, one does reflect that perhaps Christmas has been slightly different for some kids this year.
Yes, and it's a different angle from the usual stories about commercialising the holiday season.
Yeah. And at the end of this article is the best bit. It's the bit about how many arguments were expected on Christmas Day. The first one is supposed to start at 10:13 a.m. and the second family row was due at 12:24. In other words, on your way out of church, on your way into church, and on your way out. I'm happy
or trying to get the turkey in or out of the oven.
Mark, I have to say this in public. I mean, remember the whole day, no row, and that included, helping out in the kitchen, doing the washing up, and my wife and I, no row.
Well, of course, one of the great benefits of having to come into work at Christmas Day is you don't have to do the washing up. But it's interesting, the research is by Travelodge. So does that indicate that's the ultimate sanction? I'm off to Travelodge. Merry Christmas. Yeah.
Exactly.
Right, OK. Well, also coming up in a moment, I see our next selection is a hot-blooded manner is better for your heart. Should be interesting. Back with that in a moment. Reflecting on these awful conditions, the M6 story there with the photograph of the car on the top. But you've also seen a couple of stories at the bottom of the page, particularly why having a hot temper, should we say the Mediterranean hot-blooded temperament, the Italians and Spanish, live nearly 2 years longer than the stiff upper lip English. Discuss.
Discuss. Well, apparently some German researchers at the University of Vienna have decided that it's because they let out.
Externalise that anger.
Right, whereas the Brits do not.
So all those rows over Turkey actually quite good for you, though.
Well, well, if you were descended from
if you're Italian stock,
Latin folk, right. I'm a little curious about this simply because a week or two ago, there was an article about why the French live longer than the Brits. You'll notice all of these countries inside the Eurozone still live longer.
Even though they have a high cholesterol diet and they drink gallons of wine. It's just so unfair, isn't it?
That story was the blue in Roquefort cheese contains some enzyme that especially all of that fat that they eat.
Oh, really?
Help to
So what about Stilton? That's no good, is it?
I'm sorry?
It's not Stilton's no good on that. So
apparently, it must be a different strain of blue.
Oh, right.
So I always tend to wonder about this, and I was thinking, my own family had its shouters in it, and I'm trying to figure out if the married couples who really shouted, didn't keep a thing in, lived longer than those who tried to, went to therapy or whatever.
Burton and Taylor and Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf.
And what I decided, having done that, is that the men all died in their early 70s, but the women lived to be 90. And it goes to show that if in a shouting relationship, the women always win.
Nabila, are you going to raise a finger and interject?
Well, I'm of Mediterranean background. I wouldn't describe myself as fiery or particularly
No, you are very cool, calm and collected, aren't you? Yeah.
Well, I've been living in this country for 5 years now, so maybe...
So you've adapted a bit of a stiff upper lip, yeah.
But it ends with, on a positive note, the article. It says it's not all bad news for the repressors, as they are referred to in the article, because your ability to bottle things up is also an indication of your ability to recover quicker from, I don't know, illnesses or
tragedies and
because you're more disciplined and you're more motivated to.
Okay. Well, on that very note, of course, stiff upper lip, maybe one of the stiff other parts of the anatomy, with the swimmers today, which is again a very British tradition. Let's reflect. I think the Independent front page first has got them in Brighton, but actually it was called off by the council, which is why they're all still on the beach. I hadn't realised that. You can see the waves coming in. Although a few hardy souls headed out at 7:30 a.m. to preempt the ban. I think it's the Sea Lion Club, if I remember, at Brighton Beach. But hardier souls down in Exeter I think, who are on the front of the Times, who are, well, certainly in the water. Although I have to say the weather does look rather better down there, doesn't it, Exmouth?
Yeah.
It's interesting because it has been...
And there's millions of them. Look at them. They've got all those people in the background as well. I think there's a whole bunch there going all the way along the beach.
Yeah.
Are you sure that's not been taken in July? But there we are.
The headline leads with a ray of Christmas sunshine, so you
must I mean, would people all be scratching their heads at the Brits going into the sea at this time of year?
No, actually,
well, it's seen as something that's quite eccentric.
It's not uncommon. I mean, you have polar bear clubs all over. You know, and the thing is that it is rather mild this Christmas. I mean, there are June days down in the southwest where it would be the same temperature, you know.
OK, Guardian have gone for your next selection on the front page as we start to look back, of course, at the year gone by, the new year heading up, and they are deciding that the Olympics were worth every penny. Britain's end-of-year Olympic verdict.
Well, it's hard to argue with that. I have to say, it has been a spectacular success, and it was the highlight of the Queen's speech as well.
Yeah,
where she highlighted the drama and the excitement, as she put it, of the Olympics, but also the Paralympics, and you know,
and that parachute jump into the Olympic Stadium as well, which has one of the iconic images of 2012, isn't it?
But I think one of a more serious point is going into 2013. I wrote a look-ahead piece last week, and I noted that there's no feel-good factor projected for 2013. This massive bread and circuses moment, which really did make the nation feel good. And you know, it's the end of the year, people are showing highlights again, and you look at the racers, you look at Mo Farah, you look at Jessica Ennis winning, you think, yeah, God, that was good, you know? And it was one of those... People didn't feel like they were paying unless they were paying full price in their tickets.
It's the hangover and the price of austerity.
Yeah. But you'll see in 2013, you know, it's clear that the economic policy from the government isn't going to change.
Yeah.
And without a mid-year celebration, it'll be interesting to see how public opinion deals with the pressures, the continuing pressures of a slow economy.
Yeah.
Nothing to look forward to.
Interesting too, they've gone for the picture. There's Zara Phillips, of course, who won silver for Team GB at Sandringham. They've not gone for the Queen on their front page, which others have.
She also lost gold for Team GB. Yeah, has to be.
Oh, ouch!
I'm going to move down the sofa now.
But let's just reflect on the Queen. Telegraph has got the picture of her there at Sandringham with, well, she's looking rather festive there, with a smile on her face, of course, after what we were told was a bit of a cold, which is why she couldn't go to church on Sunday. But they're at the head of the family firm once more. Now, Times, back to the front page of the Times, because we've got this story about gay marriage. And the public debate is really well and truly underway now, isn't it? This is a High Court judge, Sir Paul Coleridge, who's attacked the government plans as the wrong policy and accused ministers of wasting effort on an issue that affects 0.1% of the population.
Not quite sure he's got his figures right there. But it's interesting because The Independent also has this story leading the paper, along with a picture of bathers going into the water in December. But their view is that gay marriage, the public say that the church is wrong.
So this is their own comres.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is an issue that the papers are divided on.
Yes,
and I think that
one paper is effectively saying that, leading on with a story that effectively doesn't matter because it affects so few people, and the Independent going, hang on, you know, it's actually a very public...
Well, what they do have there is the reflection of Vincent Nichols, Archbishop of Westminster, who says, from a democratic point of view, it's a shambles. That perhaps is the most accurate reflection at the moment. I mean,
and it's interesting how he put it as well, because of course he was very critical of the government proposal itself on gay marriage, but the focus of his criticism seems to be the process itself, the fact that, according to him, it was undemocratic, it was shambolic, no announcement was made by the government, no party manifesto was issued, no green paper, and all that. So he seems to focus on the...
Anyway, I think we should be hearing more from both sides in the days and weeks to come. But for the moment, thank you very much indeed for joining us this Christmas Day, and more to come, of course, in the next hour on Sky News. Stay with us.